The hardest person to forget is often the one who never knew you were waiting. The first time I met Noah Carter, I was 12 years old, wearing an oversized Little League t-shirt with ketchup on the front and grass stains on my knees. Ryan, my best friend since elementary school, had dragged me into his house after baseball practice because his mom insisted no kid should leave hungry. I barely noticed the smell of homemade chili drifting from the kitchen because my attention stopped the second someone laughed upstairs. It wasn't just any laugh. It was warm, effortless, the kind that made an ordinary afternoon feel brighter. A few seconds later, Noah came jogging down the stairs with damp hair, a faded college hoodie, and a set of truck keys dangling from one finger. He was 6 years older than us, already old enough to drive, already living in a world that felt impossibly far away. "Who's your friend?" he asked Ryan with an easy smile before glancing at me. "Lucas, right?" I remember blinking because I had never told him my name. Ryan rolled his eyes. "I literally said it 5 seconds ago." Noah laughed, rubbed the back of his neck, and apologized, but somehow it still felt like he had actually noticed me. Looking back now, maybe that's when everything quietly began. Over the next 4 years, Ryan and I were practically inseparable, which meant I was constantly around the Carter family. Summer afternoons became backyard barbecues, movie nights, pickup basketball games in the driveway, and Thanksgiving leftovers that somehow tasted even better the next day. Noah was never around all the time. He was busy with college classes, internships, and later his first engineering job, but every time he came home, the whole house felt different. Ryan complained that his brother borrowed his car without filling the gas tank. Mrs. Carter teased Noah for working too much. Mr. Carter challenged him to fix things that weren't actually broken. And me? I quietly looked forward to hearing the front door open. I never told anyone that. Not Ryan. Not my parents. Certainly not Noah. A 16-year-old boy crushing on his best friend's older brother sounded like the kind of secret that belonged in a coming-of-age movie, not real life. So I buried it beneath homework, college applications, and endless reminders that Noah probably thought of me as nothing more than the skinny kid who was always hanging around his little brother. Then, just after I graduated high school, Noah accepted a job in Seattle. The goodbye happened on an ordinary Saturday morning. Everyone hugged him. Everyone promised to visit. I stood there holding a paper cup of lemonade, smiling like everyone else while something inside me quietly folded itself away. 6 years passed after that. Life moved the way it always does. I finished college, rented my first apartment, found work at a small architecture firm downtown, and convinced myself that childhood feelings eventually disappeared if you stayed busy long enough. Most days, I even believed it. Then, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was measuring blueprints at my desk. Ryan had sent exactly 6 words. "He's coming home. This Friday." Finally, I stared at the screen until it dimmed, my reflection faintly staring back at me. My heart reacted before my mind could catch up. After 6 years, Noah Carter was coming home. And somehow, without understanding why, I had the unmistakable feeling that my life was about to change. Friday arrived with the kind of bright autumn sunshine that made every brick building downtown glow like it belonged on a postcard. I spent the entire morning pretending to focus on a residential renovation project while checking the clock every few minutes, silently annoyed with myself for acting like an anxious teenager instead of a 22-year-old professional. Around noon, Ryan texted again. "Family barbecue. 4 o'clock. Mom says you are basically required to come." I laughed despite myself because that sounded exactly like Mrs. Carter. She had never accepted excuses from anyone she considered family. And after more than a decade of showing up at birthdays, football games, holiday dinners, and random Sunday cookouts, I had somehow earned that title. By 3:30, I was standing in front of my apartment mirror changing shirts for the 3rd time. Every option suddenly looked wrong. Too formal. Too casual. Too obvious. I finally settled on a navy sweater, dark jeans, and sneakers, then immediately wondered why I cared so much. It was just dinner with friends. That was all. The familiar Carter house looked almost untouched by time. The maple tree in the front yard had grown wider, the porch swing had fresh white paint, and someone had added flower boxes beneath the windows. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, I heard Ryan shouting from the backyard, followed by the unmistakable sound of his dad arguing with the grill like it had personally offended him. Some things never changed. Mrs. Carter hugged me before I even had a chance to say hello. Lucas, sweetheart, you look too skinny. Are you eating enough? She asked, already guiding me toward the kitchen where enough food to feed an entire neighborhood covered every counter. I smiled because she had asked me the exact same question every year since I was 13. Ryan appeared carrying a bowl of potato salad. Come outside before Mom makes you take home 3 containers of leftovers. Only 3. I teased. You are optimistic. We laughed our way into the backyard, where familiar voices mixed with the smell of grilled burgers and fresh-cut grass. For a little while, everything felt comfortable. Safe. Ryan complained about work. His dad debated baseball statistics with a neighbor. Mrs. Carter insisted everyone needed another helping of corn on the cob. I almost forgot why my heart had been racing all day. Then I heard the sound of tires crunching across the driveway. Conversation slowed naturally as everyone looked toward the front of the house. A dark blue SUV rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened. Noah stepped out carrying a duffel bag over one shoulder. He looked older, of course. 6 years had softened nothing about him except perhaps his smile. He was taller than I remembered, dressed simply in a charcoal jacket, light gray shirt, and worn jeans that suggested comfort rather than fashion. A few strands of brown hair fell across his forehead as he looked around the yard, taking everything in like someone returning to a place that had lived in his memories. For too long. His mother hurried toward him first, wrapping him in a hug that made everyone else smile. Ryan followed with the kind of shoulder bump only brothers could get away with. I stayed exactly where I was, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. There was no reason he would notice me in the crowd right away. 6 years was a long time. People changed. Faces changed. Lives changed. Then Noah lifted his head. His eyes swept across the backyard once before stopping on me. For one suspended heartbeat, the noise around us seemed to disappear. His expression shifted into quiet surprise, followed almost immediately by the same warm smile I remembered from 12 years ago. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward me. Lucas, he said, like my name had never once been forgotten. You really are here. I forgot how to breathe for a second. It was embarrassing, really. I had spent 6 years imagining what this reunion might look like, and somehow none of those imaginary conversations prepared me for Noah, standing 3 feet away with that familiar, easy smile. It has been a long time. I finally managed, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Noah let out a quiet laugh that was softer than I remembered, longer than it should have been. Before I could think of a response, Ryan walked between us carrying 2 paper plates stacked with burgers. Okay, nobody gets emotional until after dessert, he announced dramatically. Dad already burned the first batch because he was too busy staring at Noah's rental car. The tension dissolved into laughter, and I silently thanked Ryan for rescuing me from what had become the most awkward 30 seconds of my adult life. Throughout dinner, I tried convincing myself to act normal. I joined conversations about football, work, and the endless road construction downtown. I laughed when everyone else laughed. I even managed to finish my meal. Yet every few minutes, I caught myself noticing Noah without meaning to. He still tilted his head when he listened carefully. He still smiled more with his eyes than his mouth. He still thanked Mrs. Carter every time she refilled his plate, even though she insisted that mothers did not accept thank yous from their own children. Some habits survived distance. At one point, Mr. Carter asked about Seattle. Noah described rainy mornings, crowded ferry terminals, mountain views, and coffee shops on nearly every block. Everyone listened with curiosity, but I noticed something different. Whenever Noah answered a question, his eyes seemed to drift back toward me for just a moment before returning to the group. Maybe I imagined it. 6 years could make anyone overthink the smallest glance. After dinner, Ryan disappeared inside to answer a work call, leaving me alone on the back porch with a glass of iced tea. The evening air had turned cooler, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and charcoal from the grill. I leaned against the wooden railing, watching the sky fade into shades of orange and blue. I thought I might find you out here. Noah's voice came from behind me. I turned too quickly and nearly spilled my drink. He smiled, reaching over to steady the glass before it tipped. Still clumsy, he asked. I blinked. You remember that? You dropped an entire pitcher of lemonade on my sneakers when you were 14, he said with a grin. I liked those sneakers. I laughed, genuinely this time. I apologized at least 20 times. 23, he corrected without hesitation. I stared at him. You counted. Apparently. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was comfortable instead of awkward, filled only by crickets somewhere beyond the fence and distant laughter from inside the house. Noah rested his forearms against the porch railing beside mine. "You have changed," he said quietly. "You seem more confident." I almost laughed at the irony. If he could hear my thoughts right now, confidence would be the last word he used. "Life has a way of forcing that," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but you still have the same habit." "What habit?" "When you are nervous, you tap your thumb against the side of your glass." I looked down in surprise. My thumb stopped moving immediately. Heat rushed into my face. I had not even realized I was doing it. Noah chuckled under his breath, not in a teasing way, but almost with quiet fondness. "Some things never change," he said. I searched for something clever to say, but nothing came. Instead, I found myself wondering one impossible question. Out of everyone he had met over the past 6 years, through every city, every job, and every new beginning, why did he remember so many little things about me? That question followed me home and stayed with me through the weekend like a song I could not stop replaying. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Noah had always been observant. Maybe he remembered little things about everyone. Maybe I was turning ordinary kindness into something bigger because I had spent too many years building impossible stories inside my own head. Monday morning arrived with deadlines, client meetings, and enough emails to keep my thoughts occupied for almost 3 full hours. Then my phone buzzed just after lunch. "Ryan, need a favor. Noah is hopelessly lost after being gone for 6 years. Can you show him around town this afternoon?" I laughed out loud in the middle of the office. Within seconds, another message appeared. "Seriously, I am stuck at work until late. Save my brother from driving in circles." I hesitated longer than I probably should have before typing a single word. "Sure." At 5:30, I found Noah waiting outside a neighborhood coffee shop that had not existed when he moved away. He leaned casually against the brick wall, hands tucked into the pockets of a dark jacket, watching people pass by with the quiet curiosity of someone rediscovering a place that had continued living without him. When he noticed me, his face brightened in a way that felt strangely genuine. "Thanks for rescuing me," he said. "Your brother made it sound like you were one wrong turn away from another state." Noah laughed. He exaggerated. "I only ended up 20 minutes in the wrong direction." "That is actually impressive." We ordered coffee and started walking through downtown. The city had changed more than either of us expected. Old bookstores had become restaurants. Empty warehouses had been transformed into apartments with rooftop gardens. A small park where Ryan and I used to skateboard now had a fountain surrounded by food trucks. I pointed out familiar landmarks mixed with new ones while Noah listened with surprising attention, asking questions about local businesses, community events, and neighborhoods that had grown over the years. It felt less like giving directions and more like introducing an old friend to someone who had quietly become a different person. As we crossed the town square, Noah stopped in front of a renovated brick building with large glass windows. "This used to be the movie theater," he said. I looked at him in surprise. "You remember? You cried here during an animated movie." I stared. I absolutely did not. "Lucas." His grin widened. "You cried because the dog got separated from its owner." I was 13. "You still cried." I shook my head, laughing despite my embarrassment. "I cannot believe you remember that." Noah looked toward the old theater for a moment before answering. "Some memories stick around for reasons you do not expect." His voice had softened, almost disappearing beneath the sound of traffic. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned politely, and silenced it without answering. "Work?" I asked. "Former co-workers checking in," he replied. "They can wait." There was something thoughtful in the way he said it, as though he had already decided that this afternoon mattered more than whatever conversation he was postponing. We continued walking until sunset painted the storefront windows gold. Eventually we reached the riverfront, where people strolled along the boardwalk with dogs, bicycles, and ice cream cones. We leaned against the railing, watching the water reflect the evening sky. Neither of us hurried to fill the silence. It felt comfortable, almost familiar, even after 6 years apart. Then Noah glanced toward me with an expression I could not quite read. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "When I left for Seattle, did you ever think about me?" My heart stumbled so hard that for a moment I forgot how to answer. The question landed so gently that anyone standing a few feet away would have thought it was ordinary. It was anything but ordinary. I looked out across the river, pretending to study the reflections dancing on the water while my mind searched desperately for a safe answer. The honest one had been waiting 6 years to escape. I thought about you when I passed your empty room during family parties. I thought about you every time Seattle appeared on the weather report. I thought about you every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, wondering if you were happy. Instead, I smiled faintly and said, sometimes. Noah tilted his head with a look that told me he knew I was holding something back, but he did not press. Sometimes, he repeated with a quiet laugh. I was hoping for at least occasionally. Fine, I admitted. More than sometimes. He nodded once, as though my answer had settled something inside him. We started walking again, our footsteps falling into an easy rhythm along the wooden boardwalk. The evening breeze carried the scent of the river and fresh popcorn from a nearby vendor. Families chased children through the park while a street musician played an old acoustic song that neither of us could quite identify. The whole town seemed wrapped in the comfortable feeling of an ordinary evening. Yet I could not shake the sense that this conversation was quietly becoming something important. Can I tell you something? Noah asked after a long silence. Of course. He slipped one hand into his jacket pocket and looked toward the skyline instead of at me. The first year in Seattle was harder than I expected. New city, new job, new apartment where I did not know anyone. I listened without interrupting. Whenever things felt overwhelming, he continued, I would think about home. I smiled. I guess everyone does. Maybe. He glanced at me briefly before looking away again. But when I pictured home, I always remembered the same people. My heartbeat quickened. My parents. Ryan. And he paused just long enough for curiosity to become almost unbearable. You. I stopped walking without realizing it. Noah noticed and turned back toward me. There was no embarrassment on his face, only quiet honesty. Me? I asked. He nodded. You always made the house feel lively. You and Ryan were constantly laughing about something. It was strange coming home during holidays and realizing neither of you were there anymore because college had taken you both in different directions. I let out a slow breath I had not realized I was holding. Part of me felt relieved by the innocent explanation. Another part felt oddly disappointed that I had imagined something more. Before I could sort through those conflicting emotions, Noah smiled again. Actually, there is something I never told you. What is it? About 2 years after I moved away, I came back for a weekend. I frowned. You did? Just for 48 hours. Dad never mentioned it because it was such a quick trip. I searched my memory and found nothing. I do not remember. You would not. His expression turned thoughtful. I asked Ryan where you were because I wanted to say hello before I flew back. My pulse quickened again. He told me you had transferred to another university for an exchange semester and would not be back until the following month. I stared at him in disbelief. You looked for me? Noah met my eyes with the same calm sincerity he had shown all afternoon. Yes. The single word settled between us like a stone dropped into still water, sending quiet ripples through everything I thought I understood. For years I had believed I was the only one carrying memories that refused to fade. Standing beside the river as the last sunlight disappeared beyond the trees, I suddenly realized that maybe I had never been remembering him alone. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The lights along the river walk flickered on one by one, their reflections stretching across the water like tiny ribbons of gold. I could hear distant laughter from a family passing behind us, but it felt as though the rest of the world had quietly stepped aside. Why? I finally asked. Why did you want to find me? Noah exhaled slowly, his hands resting on the wooden railing. I asked myself that question a lot after I went back to Seattle. He smiled to himself, almost embarrassed. At first I told myself it was because you were Ryan's best friend. You had practically grown up in our house. Of course I wondered how you were doing. I waited, sensing there was more. But that explanation stopped making sense after a while, he admitted. There were plenty of people back home that I cared about. Yet somehow you were the one I kept wondering about. My heart beat so loudly I was certain he could hear it. Noah looked out over the river instead of at me. Do you remember the notebook you used to carry everywhere? I blinked. The little sketchbook? Yes. I laughed softly. I was terrible at drawing. You were not. He smiled. You always sketched buildings, bridges, old houses. You once said that every building had a story if someone cared enough to notice. I stared at him in disbelief. You remember that? word for word. My throat tightened. I had forgotten saying it myself. He had not. When work became overwhelming, Noah continued. I would walk through Seattle and catch myself looking at old buildings because of something you said when you were 16. I realized you had been living in my head for years without even knowing it. I could not find an answer. Every sentence he spoke gently unraveled another certainty I had built around my memories. I had convinced myself that I had simply been an invisible teenager with an impossible crush. Yet here was Noah recalling conversations I barely remembered having. Lucas. His voice became quieter. There is something I have regretted for a long time. I met his eyes. When I left, I told myself the age difference mattered too much. You deserve the chance to grow up without someone older making your decisions for you. So I kept my distance, even when I wanted to reach out. My pulse skipped. I thought staying away was the responsible thing. He gave a small, self-conscious laugh. Turns out 6 years is a very long time to wonder whether you made the right choice. The breeze lifted a few strands of his hair before settling again. I searched his face for any sign that he was joking, exaggerating, or speaking out of nostalgia. I found none. Only quiet honesty. Noah, I whispered, what are you trying to tell me? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me with an expression so open that it almost hurt to meet his eyes. I am trying to tell you, he said carefully, that coming home was never just about my parents, or Ryan, or this town. There was someone else I hoped I might see again. My breath caught. The words were not a confession, not completely, but they carried the unmistakable weight of one. Before I could respond, Noah's phone vibrated once more. He glanced at the screen, silenced it without reading the message, and slipped it back into his pocket. Then he looked at me again and smiled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. I think I finally found the courage to stop wondering what might have happened if I had stayed. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Noah's voice repeating the same sentence. There was someone else I hoped I might see again. I tried convincing myself that I had misunderstood him, that 6 years of old feelings had distorted perfectly innocent words into something they were never meant to be. By morning, I had almost succeeded. Then Ryan ruined my carefully constructed denial with a single phone call. You are coming over tonight, he said without bothering to ask. Dad insists on celebrating Noah's first week back with homemade pizza. Does your family ever stop feeding people? I asked. No, and honestly I think it is the reason we all survived childhood. I laughed, grateful for the familiar rhythm of our friendship. It reminded me that some things were still simple, or at least they should have been. When I arrived that evening, the Carter house was louder than usual. Music drifted from the kitchen while Mrs. Carter argued with Mr. Carter about the correct amount of cheese. Ryan was already setting the table, and Noah stood nearby slicing vegetables with surprising concentration. Everything looked so normal that I briefly wondered whether the conversation by the river had happened at all. Noah looked up the moment I walked in. Our eyes met for only a second before he smiled and said, "Glad you made it." The words were ordinary, but something about the way he said them made my pulse quicken again. Dinner was filled with easy conversation. Ryan told embarrassing stories from high school. Mr. Carter complained about the local baseball team's latest losing streak. Mrs. Carter declared that nobody was allowed to discuss politics near her homemade pizza. Every few minutes, I caught Noah looking in my direction, and every time I looked back, he smiled as though we shared a quiet joke no one else had noticed. It should have made me happy. Instead, it filled me with a strange kind of fear. After everyone finished eating, Ryan volunteered us to wash dishes while his parents cleaned the dining room. Noah offered to help, but Ryan immediately pointed toward the backyard. Go enjoy the fresh air. Lucas and I have this. Noah hesitated for a second before nodding and stepping outside. The kitchen grew quieter once the back door closed. Ryan rinsed a plate, glanced sideways at me, and casually asked, "So, what is going on?" I nearly dropped the glass I was drying. What do you mean? You and Noah. My heart skipped. There is no me and Noah. Ryan raised one eyebrow in the same skeptical way he had since we were kids. Lucas, I have known you for almost 15 years. You have been acting weird since the second he got home. I opened my mouth, closed it again, and focused very hard on a coffee mug that did not need my attention. Ryan sighed, setting another plate into the drying rack. For what it is worth, he has been acting weird too. I looked up before I could stop myself. What does that mean? He keeps asking about you. Ryan shrugged. Your job. Your apartment. Whether you still sketch buildings. Whether you are happy. Honestly, it is kind of impressive how much he remembers. My chest tightened. Ryan leaned against the counter, studying me more carefully than usual. Can I ask you something? I nodded. If something happened between you two while you were walking by the river, are you worried about me? The question caught me completely off guard. I stared at my best friend, realizing that my greatest fear had never been what Noah felt. It had always been the possibility of losing the friendship that had shaped my entire life. Before I could answer, the back door slid open, and Noah stepped quietly into the kitchen, stopping the instant he realized the conversation had fallen. Silent. Noah looked between the two of us, immediately sensing that he had interrupted something important. Did I come in at a bad time? He asked. Ryan glanced at me before answering with a small smile. Actually, maybe your timing is perfect. My pulse climbed into my throat. Ryan dried his hands with a kitchen towel, leaned against the counter, and looked first at his brother, then at me. I have been watching both of you dance around each other for almost a week now. Noah blinked. Ryan, no, hear me out. Ryan chuckled softly. You think you are both subtle. You are not. I felt my face grow warm. Noah rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking far less confident than the calm, composed man I had seen since he returned home. I did not want to make anything complicated, Noah admitted quietly. Neither did I said before I could stop myself. Ryan pointed toward both of us with an expression of exaggerated triumph. See? This is exactly what I mean. He shook his head with an amused laugh. Do you honestly think I never noticed the way 12-year-old Lucas suddenly volunteered to come over every time Noah was home from college? Or how my brother somehow remembered every tiny detail about Lucas years after moving across the country? I stared at him. You knew? Not everything, Ryan answered honestly. But enough. The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, Ryan's smile softened into something warmer. You two spent years worrying about hurting me without ever asking what I actually thought. Noah looked almost apologetic. I never wanted you to feel like I was putting you in an awkward position. Ryan shrugged. You are my brother. Then he turned toward me. And you are basically my other brother. He paused before grinning. Well, maybe not exactly anymore. I groaned, covering my face while Ryan laughed at his own joke. Even Noah laughed, the sound light enough to dissolve the tension that had been building for days. Ryan stepped closer and rested one hand on each of our shoulders. Listen carefully, because I am only saying this once. If the two people I care about the most happen to care about each other, why would I stand in the way of that? I looked up slowly, hardly believing what I had just heard. Ryan continued before either of us could interrupt. Life is already complicated enough. If you both have a chance to be happy, I would rather cheer you on than spend years watching you regret the opportunities you never took. The words settled over the room with surprising gentleness. I felt something inside me finally loosen after years of carrying a fear I had never spoken aloud. Noah met my eyes across the kitchen, and for the first time since he returned home, neither of us looked away. Later that evening, after Ryan disappeared into the living room to help his parents choose a movie, Noah and I stepped onto the back porch again. The cool night air carried the familiar scent of pine trees and fresh grass. Your brother is remarkable, Noah said with a quiet laugh. He always has been. We stood side by side in comfortable silence until Noah turned toward me. Lucas, I do not want to rush anything. We lost enough time already because of assumptions. I nodded slowly. I agree. So let me ask you something simple instead. His smile was hopeful, almost shy. Would you let me take you to dinner this weekend? Just the two of us. No pretending it is because Ryan is busy. No excuses. I felt myself smiling before I even answered. I would like that. Noah's shoulders relaxed with visible relief, and his smile became brighter than I had ever seen it. For the first time in 6 years, neither of us was wondering what might have been. We were finally beginning to discover what still could be. 1 year later, the town looked almost exactly the same, yet somehow everything in my life had changed. The maple tree outside the Carter house had grown another ring of leaves. Mrs. Carter still insisted everyone leave with leftovers. Mr. Carter still believed he could fix anything with enough patience and the right wrench. Ryan still complained about my taste in music every time we drove somewhere together. Some things were meant to stay familiar because they reminded us where we started. Other things changed in the quietest, most wonderful ways. Noah and I never rushed our story. Our first dinner became weekend coffee. Weekend coffee became evening walks after work. Evening walks turned into road trips to small towns with historic buildings that I insisted on photographing, while Noah patiently waited for me to finish examining every brick and window frame. Somewhere along the way, we stopped wondering whether this happiness would disappear. It simply became part of our everyday lives. One Saturday morning, almost exactly a year after Noah returned home, my architecture firm unveiled the restoration of the old downtown theater. The same theater where Noah still remembered me crying over an animated movie years earlier now stood beautifully restored, its original brickwork carefully preserved beneath fresh lights and polished glass. Standing inside that building felt strangely symbolic. Some things were never meant to be replaced. They simply needed time, care, and someone willing to believe they were worth saving. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered for the opening ceremony. Ryan spent most of the afternoon pretending to give unofficial tours despite knowing almost nothing about architecture. Mrs. Carter proudly introduced me to complete strangers as if I had personally rebuilt the entire city. Noah stayed nearby, smiling every time he caught me looking his way. As the celebration slowly wound down, he asked if I wanted to step onto the rooftop balcony for a minute. The evening sky stretched above us in soft shades of orange and blue, almost identical to the sunset we had watched by the river a year earlier. Downtown lights flickered to life beneath us, while distant laughter drifted up from the street. Noah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook with worn edges. I recognized it immediately. It was not mine, but it looked familiar. "Do you remember giving this to me?" he asked. I blinked in surprise. "That cannot be." He handed it to me carefully. Inside were dozens of rough sketches of old buildings, bridges, and neighborhood houses. They were mine. I had drawn them as a teenager and forgotten all about them. I thought I lost this. Noah smiled. "You left it at our house one afternoon. I meant to return it, but then college became work. Work became Seattle, and somehow it stayed with me." I gently turned another page. Tucked inside was a small folded note written in my own 16-year-old handwriting. "Every building deserves someone who sees the story inside it." I laughed softly at my younger self. Noah looked at me with the same warmth that had first caught my attention all those years ago. I kept that notebook because it reminded me of someone who always saw beauty where other people walked past without noticing. He took a slow breath before continuing. "Lucas, you have been my favorite story for longer than either of us realized. I do not want to spend another 6 years wondering what comes next." He reached into his pocket once more and revealed a simple silver ring. Nothing extravagant, nothing dramatic, just something honest. "Will you build the rest of our story with me?" My eyes filled before I could answer. I nodded, laughing through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Behind us came the unmistakable sound of applause. We turned to find Ryan leaning in the rooftop doorway with both parents beside him, all three smiling as though they had expected this moment all along. Ryan shook his head with exaggerated satisfaction. "I knew one of you would eventually figure it out." Everyone laughed. As the city lights shimmered beneath the evening sky, I realized that the greatest changes in life rarely arrive all at once. Sometimes they begin with an old friend opening a front door, a familiar smile after years apart, and the courage to stop wondering what might have been so that you can finally embrace everything that still can be.